Welcome back, guys. Chris here, and in this video, I want to talk to you about SuiteCommerce, which is NetSuite's proprietary tool or product for building and managing e-commerce websites. So if you either have an existing web store, or maybe you know you need a web store and you'd like to create one, and you want to have it fully within the NetSuite ecosystem as opposed to a bolt-on integration, then you would be looking at something like SuiteCommerce. So when talking about SuiteCommerce, there's a few different levels that you can think with. And the first one I think is important to mention is not officially SuiteCommerce, but it's really the predecessor, which is Site Builder. Site Builder is now a deprecated tool that is kind of the legacy product NetSuite had for building and managing websites. It used HTML editor to make the websites. It was incredibly clunky, very, very limited in terms of what it can do. And again, while there are still some companies that utilize websites made using Site Builder, they've definitely phased it out as a product, and NetSuite is now focusing on SuiteCommerce and really has done for about a decade now. So once you move up into the actual SuiteCommerce product, the first level is SuiteCommerce Standard, which is often just referred to as SuiteCommerce. And you can think about it as the sort of out-of-the-box version. If you want something that's a little bit more limited, you want templates that you can simply choose, and that's exactly what your website's going to look like, then SuiteCommerce Standard might be fine for you. You're not going to be going into the underlying code and actually customizing things. If you have that requirement, then you would go upgraded to SuiteCommerce Advanced, usually referred to as SCA, and that is the full suite. So you can do anything you want with it, and it's basically NetSuite giving you a domain and you can customize it to your heart's content. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the capabilities, but those are the standard, advanced, and then in addition to that, both versions have what's called My Account, which is really just a simple portal option if you want your vendors or customers to be able to access things like, for a vendor, it would be checking maybe their ongoing orders that you have with that vendor, and so they know what they need to fulfill. And for customers, it would be looking at their financial statements, if they want to check their invoices, print things, pay invoices, anything like that, maybe even order additional things on their own portal. They could do it all through that. It's a very basic setup. There's not a lot that goes into it. You choose from a few different setups. Honestly, it looks and feels a lot like the employee portal if you've ever interacted with that. It's pretty bare bones, just a few different features you're going to click on. If you have requirements, if you want to really go above and beyond something like that, you want something more elaborate, a little flashier, there are options for that. And I'm actually going to make a video in a couple weeks talking about some of those options, but they are in addition to NetSuite. There are some proprietary options that you can go with. So I'll talk about that in a separate video. But understand, you've got Site Builder is really the deprecated legacy product that NetSuite has had for e-commerce websites. Then you have Standard, or just SuiteCommerce. Then you have SCA, and then of course My Account goes with both options. So those are the options. And if you're looking at something like SuiteCommerce, no doubt you're already quite familiar with some of the competing products. You've got things like Shopify, Magento, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, etc., etc. So I'm not going to be talking about every single one of these products and how each of them compares to SuiteCommerce, because while there's quite a bit of differences between, let's say, Magento and something like Shopify, when you compare them as a group to SuiteCommerce, that's where you really start to see a big difference in terms of the functionality, the look, and some of the key pros and cons in relation to them. So instead of pitting each one against SuiteCommerce, I'm really going to compare SuiteCommerce to all of the other competitors as a grouping. So now let's get into pros and cons. What are the things that really allow SuiteCommerce to shine and something you would want to take a look at it for, and where does it tend to fall down? And we'll start off with the positives. The number one reason that someone would want to go with something like SuiteCommerce is really for the same reason that you would want to get any native NetSuite tool as opposed to going with a third-party alternative, which is that it is natively in NetSuite. It's built straight into the system. It's really like the website is just existing on top of the ERP system itself. And there are a number of different positives that come as a result of that. First off, because they're integrated, getting the information like your item records and all the key info related in the system onto your website, those are just links that get set up. It's not very difficult. And when things get updated in your system, let's say a price change, anything like that, description changes, etc., those can automatically update in the SuiteCommerce website. Not that they happen instantly. There's a few different ways you can set up the syncing process, but it's certainly much faster on average than what you're going to find with something like Shopify, where you need a connector going between the website and your actual NetSuite instance, and then there tends to be a slower cadence on the updates. So it's not as real time if you're dealing with one of those third-party alternatives. In addition to that, because you have those two things really working together, meaning your SuiteCommerce and your NetSuite ERP, your reporting capabilities then expand as a result. So everything's in-house. You get those reporting details much faster. What's going on the website can feed back into the system, and you can generate reports as such much more rapidly and much more comprehensively. Now, there are other benefits. For example, if you have a large number of SKUs or you have some pretty deep item matrices, then generally speaking, you're going to be able to include more in the system with something like SuiteCommerce than with, let's say, WooCommerce or Shopify, etc. They have more limitations in terms of how many items and item variants that you can have in the system. And then overall, I would say that much like NetSuite itself, SuiteCommerce is just a solid system. It's not fancy, it's not flashy, it doesn't look great, but if you know how to work it, it is pretty robust and it's a reliable system. And the fact that it is, again, just within native NetSuite, not a bolted on connection using a separate connector linking your website to your system, all of these things just provide for a more robust system and a more robust website, which is always a positive. Now, what are some of the negatives on the other side of the coin? The first one that I would bring up as the major consideration is, especially if you're dealing with the out-of-the-box version of SuiteCommerce, it is limited in terms of its capabilities. You're not going to be having a lot of wild customizations, and as soon as you're getting into that territory, it's not something that you can do on your own. Unlike if you're dealing with something like Shopify, where the tools are a little bit more intuitive, you're able to do some customizations and some of these not just straight theme-based templates on your own. You can do those in those other options. When you're dealing with SuiteCommerce, anytime you want to go out of the bounds and start customizing things, you're going to need to rely on a professional developer who knows SuiteCommerce, especially SuiteCommerce Advanced. This is something that is just a straight up requirement. And going on to the second negative that kind of feeds right off of that, when you're looking for developers for SuiteCommerce, the pool of available options is much more limited. Things like Shopify, these are very, very large companies, and there's a lot of businesses that use Shopify. And as a result, there are so many different developers who have gained skills on how to use those products, not only because there's so many clients, but also because the products are easier to use. So it's easier for freelance or independent developers to learn these skills and then offer their own services to companies like yourself. All of that allows for more options, also higher skilled options, and just a general reasonable rate when you're dealing with these developers. So you have a much wider pool if you do need a developer from which to choose. Compared to SuiteCommerce, where again, if you want to do any customizations, you have to use a seasoned developer. And the pool for seasoned developers is very, very small because it's really just the actual programming that's required for doing SCA. It's JavaScript, but it's like an older version of JavaScript. They call it Backbone JS from 2010. So there's just a handful of guys that actually have real chops using and programming in this kind of code. Personally, I know a lot of consultants. And when it comes to knowing seasoned SCA developers, I can count them on one hand. There's just not that many guys to go to. And if you're gonna do that kind of implementation, you wanna make sure that you get someone who's good. Because while there's so much that you can do with the system, and there's a little bit of a misconception that SuiteCommerce is, when you go into the customization element of things, that it's more limited in terms of what you can pull off compared to, let's say, Magento. The reality is that you can do almost everything that you would do in Magento. You could do the exact same thing in SCA. The question just becomes, do you have someone who knows how to do it? And do you have the money, because these guys do cost more, to pull off that kind of implementation? It's not necessarily that it takes longer. You just need to get someone who's expert on an SCA implementation specifically. So that is a major drawback. And even if it's not a drawback, it's something you should think with if you're going to move forward with SCA. The next downside for SuiteCommerce is maybe something that's a little bit more historical, but just something you should be aware of. When NetSuite itself gets updates, as you probably already know, it happens twice a year. Everyone's forced onto it, and it just happens as a matter of course. So everyone's on the most up-to-date version. Not that way with SuiteCommerce. SuiteCommerce they just do it on demand. Usually it's one or twice a year. They'll have a new update come out, and you can either go onto it or not. What's happened in the past, and I have heard complaints about this from clients, is that if you were on an older version of SuiteCommerce and then suddenly they come out with, let's say you're 5 versions back and they come out with a new version and you see something there that you would like. So you want to go on to that new version, but now you got to come up through 5. It's not jumping to the new version. You got to come really linearly to get to that point, coming along with all the other updates that have gone along with that. And as a result, again, maybe this is more historical. I don't know that this is going to happen with you moving forward, but if you run into a situation like that, I've seen people have to do almost an entirely new implementation, bringing their items back into the system, hooking things up, adding descriptions, because the changes between several updates to get to the new one were so dramatic that it required that kind of transition. Now, at this point, obviously, if you got SuiteCommerce right now, you'd be on the most up-to-date version. And if you decide to move up in one update, they tend to be more minor. They tend to be, not that they don't come out with improvements, but they don't tend to be so system breaking. Usually you need a consultant to come in, a developer, maybe for a couple hours, make sure that they iron out some of the kinks. Sometimes it might take as much as a day, but in general, they've been a little bit more considerate about their updates. So it's not such a drawback for the existing clients that are utilizing the system. So that is something to think with. Another thing that you should keep in mind is that just like NetSuite itself, a major point or thing that people commonly bring up as something that's annoying about NetSuite is its speed. NetSuite tends to be one of the slower ERP systems, especially when considered compared to a lot of the on-premise options that are existing in the ecosystem. And it's just known for being a little slower loading pages, creating new records, saving things, updating, generating lists, all of these things. NetSuite tends to be a little bit slow when moving through these operations. Same goes for SuiteCommerce. Again, it's all on the NetSuite system. So it's not that it's incredibly slow. I don't want to give you that impression, but I have seen clients be a little bit dismayed when they've been on another system like Shopify. They've then moved on to something like SuiteCommerce and noticed that loading pages, especially ones that have a lot of items or information on the page, drawing up a cart, trying to go to the checkout, sometimes the pages load just a little bit slower than what they're used to. So that I'm not going to say that happens all the time, but that's something that you should be aware of. It can happen, especially if there's more load on the system. Okay, so those are the pros and cons. Now let's talk a little bit about the logistics, starting with the price. And I'm not going to give you exact figures because these things change all the time, but you should be aware that just like your NetSuite license, you're going to be paying for SuiteCommerce as an annual subscription. Rarely do people pay full ticket price. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen someone do that. You generally get some kind of discount. It could be as small as 10%, it can be as large as 50%. It really just depends on your overall package, what you're negotiating with your NetSuite representative. But you can keep that in mind. It's never going to be full price. You can always get some kind of knockdown, but even then, it's not cheap. That's for sure. But the way you should think about it is not just the sticker price of, let's say, something like SuiteCommerce compared to Shopify. There are really different ways that you're going to be paying, because if you're on something like Shopify, they're going to be taking a cut of every transaction. So you have to look at it on a business-to-business basis and decide for yourself, based on how your business operates, does it make more sense to maybe come off of a transaction-based pay system and go to something that's just a standard annual subscription. And also think with the fact that if you get something like, let's say Shopify, and you need a connector, let's say you use something like Celigo, the connector itself can be very expensive. So you have to add that onto the price of whatever you're paying normally for, again, whether it's WooCommerce, BigCommerce, etc. They all have slightly different pay systems in mind, but in each circumstance, you really just need to look at what the alternative is to SuiteCommerce that you're interested in and determine for yourself, does that pay scale and that pay model make more sense for you compared to more a flat annual rate that you're going to be paying as long as you have that site. So that's it in terms of the pay. Now, in terms of the implementation, again, it really depends on how deep you go as well as who's doing your implementation. I've said before, and I really can't stress this enough, you want to make sure you get an excellent developer who really knows SuiteCommerce, especially SuiteCommerce Advanced, very, very well. So in terms of that, I'm kind of assuming you're getting somebody who's good. And in that circumstance, it actually doesn't take that long. You can have a basic, like let's say you're using SCA, you can have the bare bones system up and running within a day, and you can have an actual functioning website within, I would say safely 2 weeks if the developer is working on it full time. So you can take more time if you want to get really, really elaborate, or if you're using maybe a less experienced developer, or they're just not working on it full time. But if you can kind of bring those things together, it can be done very rapidly. The last couple points I want to make is that it is, just like with NetSuite, it is translation friendly. So if you need to have websites in Spanish, etc., you can have that configured relatively easily using SuiteCommerce. And you don't have to have a developer. Once you've got the site up and running, you don't need a developer to do every single thing in the system. There is a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, tool set that allows you to add new content, new pages as the administrator. Even if you're not a developer, you don't know anything about doing the coding side of things, you can still, it's not the most intuitive tool that you've ever used, but they do have some capability to add additional content, change descriptions, etc. within the system as an administrator without having to go to your developer once again. So that's your overall look at SuiteCommerce. My general recommendation is that SuiteCommerce shines on B2B. So if you have a relatively basic B2B setup, then it is a very, very viable option. I've seen a lot of clients be quite happy with their configuration using SuiteCommerce for a lot of the same reasons that they like using NetSuite. It's a robust system, it's reliable, and it has a lot of capability. The same goes for SuiteCommerce, and it also tends to have the same drawbacks that NetSuite has. It's not flashy, it can be expensive in some cases, it can be a little bit slow, and it's got a higher degree of learning. You're not dealing with QuickBooks here. This is something that requires expertise and requires some technical ability to make sure that it's doing exactly what you want. But let's be honest, you've already gone through the challenge of implementing NetSuite, so it may not be as bad for you to bring in SuiteCommerce and take advantage of some of those benefits over top of the obvious downsides that come along with it. So hopefully that gives you some more information that can help you decide if SuiteCommerce is right for you. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm going to be coming out probably in 2 weeks with a video talking specifically about a portal tool that you can utilize to have a much more impressive and highly capable portal option for your customers, vendors, suppliers, etc. So I'll talk about that coming up. Subscribe if you want to see videos like that. And with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.